All right, so for this last session before the lunch break, we're going to talk about securing the entire supply chain and how to succeed in implementing a cybersecurity plan in the industrial fields with Sabri Kemisa, who we heard from a little bit earlier, who's a cybersecurity expert from Fortress Cybersecurity. So over to you. Thank you. Just to introduce myself very briefly, I'm a cybersecurity expert, everything relating to industrial systems, industrial facilities, and I've been involved in that line of work for about 25 years now. I think I did my first diagnosis in an industrial plant in 2003. 15 years in the departments, but then as a cyber officer in different industrial companies. And in 2024, with my partner Caroline, we created Fortress Cybersecurity, dedicated to the security of industrial facilities. So the idea is to work on cybersecurity from the strategy phase to the processing, transformation, implementation, and operational phase. So I'm going to focus my presentation on the strategy and consultancy aspect. So how we can provide an answer to the question, where do we start? And where do we start is a question that comes up a lot when you want to work in this area. The first point that I believe is very important at Fortress is we talk about industrial facilities. We don't talk about SCADA, we don't talk about tools, we talk about industrial facilities. So when you have a plant, of course, you have the production tool with the control command, whether it's a SCADA or a DCS. These are different architectural paradigms, but they are very similar. But beyond the control system, we see that there are a number of subsidiary systems, laboratories, energy management systems. You can have cloud as well. You can have remote maintenance. You can have dependency between different plants. And so to have a relevant approach from a cybersecurity viewpoint, you need to treat the entire industrial facility and not only the production tool. That is why Fortress Cybersecurity always refers to an industrial facility. All right. Sorry, I just wanted to show you this. Now, from experience today, when you're considering and envisaging the organization of a cyber protection plan, there are 8 points that can be considered to be essential before you start. There's the issue of the scope, the perimeter. So an industrial system is many components, many systems that are all integrated into each other, and subsidiary systems. So you have to define the scope. What is it that we're doing? What is it that we're covering? The typical example that you see is you have, it comes up quite often, you have the production tool, DCS or SCADA. But in some cases, you can have systems that or alongside that, or that you don't think perhaps are very important, but in fact, those could have a strong dependency. Just to give you an example, is the laboratory, for example. In a laboratory where you have plants, if they don't have the laboratory tests, the product cannot be sent to the client. So you have a system that looks like it's a secondary system, but in fact that is vital. It's embedded in the whole production system. So you have to make sure you have the right scope and that you understand the interactions between the different components in the plants and the production processes. There's no secret to do that. You have to go to the plants, you have to visit the plants, you have to understand their processes, how they work. I'm not talking about a sightseeing visit, I'm talking about really grasping, understanding what the industrial production process is. The second component is the organization. I was saying a cyber plan for an industrial scope. It's not a cyber for cyber project. You have to integrate industrial management. Also, the teams on site, you mustn't forget them because they're the ones who are going to be providing and operating the solutions. So you also have to include the IT department. As I said this morning, the idea is not to oppose the industrial teams and the IT teams. I'm never going to do an IT versus OT approach. In fact, there is no sense in comparing the two, but all of this is complementary. So the IT department needs to be involved because to have a DCS, supervisory control data acquisition system, there are various aspects, saving, updating, and within the organization, the knowledge in those scopes is in the IT system. It's not in the teams at the plant. I'm not saying it's easy to do, but you have to make sure you integrate, you include IT in the approach. Yeah, no, so we have shadow OT, shadow IT, but in fact we need to make sure we have IT with us when we talk about that. When I talked about this morning, I was talking about the time frame. There's an issue, do things at the right time. You know, when you start a system, you look at the visibility, you start, and when you start out on this sort of project, it's an approach, but you also, and I was giving an example this morning of the bathtub theory, because, you know, the priority when you start out is probably not to manage obsolescence. In fact, when you start, you're managing the new projects that are coming in, and that's for a simple reason, because if you have several plants, you're going to observe, you have an audit report, you know, you don't even need an external audit form to do that. We know what the audit is going to show. So your bathtub is full. It's full of all your weaknesses, vulnerabilities. And what's going to happen is you're going to try to reduce all these weaknesses and vulnerabilities. But at the same time, you've got these new projects coming in, and they are coming in with their own vulnerabilities and weaknesses. So your tap is still flowing into your bathtub, and your bathtub is filling up in weaknesses and vulnerabilities. So then you're in a sort of a vicious circle, a negative spiral, and you'll never manage to overcome it all. So the idea is to propose a framework for new projects for cybersecurity that will represent your cybersecurity target. Of course, everything won't go into the framework, but you have to make it available. And concomitantly, you need to work on obsolescence. And obsolescence, one of the mistakes that I've seen very often, a project to revamp and to reshape, and that's going to take years. So the second phase on obsolescence, this is what we believe at Fortress Cybersecurity. We need to treat the protection of the systems as is. So you take them and you do what you can. You can organize segmentation with firewalls. You can do backup, even if it's Windows XP. You can copy the disk. You can also do disk snapshots. There's a lot of things that you can do quickly in a remediation mode, as it were, to improve the level of protection. The second component on that obsolescence part is to improve your detection and reaction capabilities. So if you can't secure everything, at least try and detect any problems as fast as possible and try to take remedial measures very fast. So that is the medium-term strategy. And the third phase is, how am I going to get my obsolescent equipment to update to current security standards. So you need to have this time frame in mind. You can't do everything at the same time. So the fourth point, which is exactly what I'm coming to now, is establishing priorities. So for companies that have many industrial sites, some of them have hundreds of industrial sites. Here you have to establish your priorities. So among the sites, of course, you also have to know within a single site, what is your priority? So the guide for classification of industrial sites is quite useful, and also to classify the systems within the same site. And there's also a point that could be added, which is managing interdependence between sites, of course, because if sites depend on each other, you need to take that into account in your think tank and in your whole thought process. Then the framework, which is the core model. What standards are you going to implement, whether in terms of technical or organizational aspects? So it's not just technical, it's processes, it's inventory, it's risk management. The sixth point is the rollout model, the deployment model. Why is that? Because it's going to condition the next 2 points. So how are you going to roll it out? You've got your framework in place. How are you going to roll it out? There are 3 different options. The first is plant by plant, and you deploy the framework. Okay, that's a vertical rollout. Or you have a horizontal rollout, which is to say you have a standard, it's ready, let's deploy it, let's roll it out to all the plants. There's no perfect model. It depends on what you want to do. We usually have a hybrid model that's implemented. You have to make a choice in your doctrines. You, within the organization, just say whether you're doing vertical or horizontal. And for the rest, you do it based on opportunities as they arise. If you have a standard that you can roll out quite easily, it depends. You need to choose your model, but there's no single right model. The 7th point that's important is the sourcing strategy. What are you making and what are you buying? So today we know that we have a lack of expertise, a lack of human resources, and that's also one of the things we do at Fortress is to train experts. So you need to outsource part of it. So what are you keeping in-house? What are you outsourcing? Personally, my opinion is that everything that is specific to the organization, inventory, risk management is specific, so keep it in-house. But all the rest that's more standardized, where there's no intrinsic or immediate value for the organization, or where you need time to learn, that you can outsource. The last thing, of course, is financing. Well, I have to talk about money at some point. So who is paying? Does the finance come from the cyber team? Is it financing from the industrial management, or is it by the plants themselves? There's a 4th case, which is a bit specific when you talk about some operators, which are operators and organizing authorities, for example, waste management and water. But that's a 4th sector. But for the 3 I was mentioning first, you have to make a decision. Who is paying? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. There are advantages and disadvantages to all the different scenarios. The example I talked about this morning, if it is the plant that's paying for its cyber plan, obviously, well, the plant manager has to have objectives related to that, and it has to be clear who's paying and to do what. So that discussion has to be undertaken very clearly and clearly discuss these issues to make sure that you know who's paying for this roadmap. So those are the 8 points I wanted to emphasize, which are extremely important. And if you miss one of those, there will always be something missing, and you're going to have a problem. Because people in the plants, well, they'll see you at the beginning. It's always complicated. They see people coming in with a new system. They're going, what do they want? So as soon as anything goes wrong, they will blame you. So you need to make sure you follow these steps. You need to anticipate any questions that might come up. Of course, you can't answer absolutely everything in advance, but if you have 60 to 80% of answers already to questions that can come up, and to try and make a positive approach of it. There you have it. And I think I stuck to my timing. Well done. Just to finish, a small point. We organize webinars on these topics with more detailed content over an hour. We did one on the 7th of March, and we'll do it again in October. So you have content, slightly longer content, so don't hesitate to come back to me or Caroline for more information. Thank you very much.